Hi, my name is Harry. I'm a second year economics and finance with industrial experience student, and today I'll be showing you what a day in my life as a student in the business school is like. I've got a really busy day coming up. I've got 3 seminars, one of which is going to be in person, and I've got a little time booked in the library, so we'll see what that's like today. And then this afternoon I can discuss a little bit about the type of social activity that I might get up to and other activities that I might get up to in my spare time. So it's fairly early in the morning now. I've just had my breakfast, I'm all ready to go. So all that's left now is to pack my bag and get ready to walk into campus for my first seminar of the day. Usually I'd cycle in, but unfortunately my bike got broken just before we went into lockdown and I didn't get a chance to fix it. So I've got a nice half an hour trek in this glorious cold November weather, which would be absolutely fantastic to wake me up. But other than that, I will fill you in on my plans for this morning just before I leave. So it's 9 in the morning now, and I'm about to head off on my walk to campus. It's about half an hour from where I live for my first seminar of the day. It'll be an ethics seminar, so there'll be some interesting discussion. And then after that, I'll go to the library for a bit, do some additional notes for another seminar I have. And while in the library, I'm fairly sure I've got another seminar to get done as well. So a very busy day today. In my bag, I've got my laptop, a little bit of food, and obviously I've got my mask. I've got to stay safe during COVID. But hopefully after the seminar and all my notes are taking place, I'll be back in time for lunch. Hey, so I'm on campus now. Obviously got my mask on for COVID. I'm at my ethics seminar, so I got here a little bit early so I could film this bit. But I'm sure people will be arriving in a minute, and then what we'll do is we'll get down to discussing certain situations that have been posed in the tutorial questions that relate to our course so far. So the topic we're on at the moment is what should be for sale. So this discussion will be all about whether we should be allowed to have markets for certain things and whether having a market for that thing diminishes its value at all. So hopefully that'll be a really interesting discussion. I've been selected by the lecturer to discuss certain points today, so I will definitely be involved, and I will fill you in afterwards on how it all went.
Markets be. Generally, when we talk about the limits of markets, we're talking about the market versus the state. Where do we think the market ought to leave off and the state ought to kick in? This is rather different discussion of the limits of markets. It's about the kind of moral limits of markets. When is it right and when is it wrong to have markets in particular things? So that's what this week's all about. The lectures. I also did a bit on this in the whole class session yesterday, and it was a bit of a technological disaster. But I did a bit on betting. You know, if you ask what is it right or wrong to have markets in, you could equally ask the question. And so, Harry, you're going to tell us what you think.
Yeah, I had a few points written down. So most of my points are against it. I struggled to come up with an argument for. So obviously there's the natural moral obligations to just selling off the rights to kill animals, but unless you're a vegetarian, that one doesn't really hold as well. I also said it could just lead to hunting of other animals. So if these hunters have to pay 10 grand to shoot a rhino, they might just think it's cheaper to go and find a lion to shoot instead. So that could just lead to other animals becoming endangered. There's no guarantee that the ranchers and the government can keep control of this market, so it might just lead to corruption and stuff like that. So there's just because they're getting paid to kill the rhinos doesn't mean they then have to put that money back into the conservation of rhinos. They could just be happy with what they've got and take the money and leave, and all we're left with is a lower rhino population. So those were a few of the main points that I came up with.
But they should have still got, they have got an incentive to conserve the rhinos. I agree. It's not certain that's what they do with the money, but the point is you're giving them an incentive to conserve the rhinos, which they wouldn't have if you didn't have the shooting.
Yeah, and I do think that the population of rhinos would increase, but eventually the rhinos would get to a point where they don't need conservation anymore necessarily, at which point it's unlikely the government would keep allowing people to just pay to shoot them, because it would, it just wouldn't be feasible. So then they'd be unprotected again and the populations would just fall back down to normal. How long is this protection going to be in place?
Yeah, okay.
So I've just finished that ethics seminar. We had some really interesting discussions about markets and the legality and moral hazards of certain markets. For example, should you be allowed to sell your vote, or should you be encouraged to sell your kidney if you need the money? Some really interesting ethical dilemmas when it comes to what should be for sale. I really enjoy these in-class discussions because they give a good opportunity to expand my learning and to hear lots of alternative points of view that I wouldn't have got just looking at these dilemmas on my own. What I'll do to follow up on this seminar for next week is to do the optional readings, so look at the books that have been referenced and the papers by people like Marx and Keynes, who you'll definitely hear all about if you do an economics degree. What I can do almost immediately though is start working on next week's tutorial, so we'll definitely have a discussion on the topic of equality next week, so that's next week's topic. So we have some more dilemmas and some more questions for discussion next week. So I'll start reading for those, start taking some notes, and hopefully be ready for next week's discussion in much the same way. For now though, it's about 10:30, so I'm going to go to the library and finish up some additional notes that I need to write up for a seminar I have this afternoon. So that's what I'm going to do until around lunchtime. I just finished my lunch, so I took it as a nice break to go and sit outside and catch up on some stuff that isn't uni work. But now I've got my notes written from the library this morning, and I'm ready to get into this microeconomics seminar and show you a bit of what online teaching is looking like this year with the pandemic. So I'm actually in my microeconomics tutorial now. If I quickly turn the camera around, you can see there that I am on a Zoom call with my lecturer there, and I've got my tutorial on the other side of the screen. So this is going to be an hour-long discussion where we go through all of the questions in the tutorial, explain the answers through to them, and interact with the lecturer and ask any questions that we have. So what I'm going to do is set down the camera here and show a little bit of the tutorial.
Right. So your demand for X2 is just your income, and it's going to be minus how much you spend on X1 divided by the price. So your demand for X2 will be M P2 yeah. And so it's like whatever I don't spend on X1, I spend it on X2. Alright? Thanks. No problem, that's alright. Alright.
So there we go, I just finished the microeconomics seminar that I was doing. I managed to show you a little bit of the work that was going on in that online bit of teaching. So what I'll do now is discuss the sort of things we went over. So today's tutorial was all about the demand functions. So you might have heard of Marshallian demand or Hicksian demand. It was all stuff to do with that. So the ways that consumers
choose what they want to buy based on how much income they have and how much everything costs. To follow up on this, I know we didn't quite finish the tutorial, so all of the questions that we had. So I'll definitely go back through and finish off the final few questions in preparation for next week. In addition to that, I can start reading the slides and the handouts for next week and the readings, and then that'll put me in a good position then to participate fully in this session this time next week.
So in regards to last year then, before the pandemic, where we all have to stay inside and stay away from each other, it was obviously a lot easier to get out and socialise and meet people. So I was a member, and still am, of Volleyball Soc, which is a great way to have fun, stay active, meet loads of people. So we trained once or twice a week, and then there was at least a social every week or two. And that was fantastic, a really, really great way to get to know people at uni and have fun. I'm also a member of the Economic Society, which is a slightly more academic side of it, so lots of talks along with that, lots of industry knowledge, and also just a good way to meet people with obviously similar interests, if we're all on the same course and we get along. I would also play some intramural football last year. So me and a few friends would go up to the AstroTurf at the top of the sports park and play some organised six-a-side against a bunch of other societies. So we played against Cycling Society and Postgrad Society and so on and so on. And really good opportunity to stay active again and keep up with the sport, and then even then meet people way outside of who you usually would have met, because I never would have interacted with anybody from Cycling Soc or anything like that otherwise. But now then, now that we are in isolation this year, so what we can do instead now, so to stay active, we've just come out of November, for which I did the Movember runs, so I ran the 60k in that month, which was a good way to keep my pulse up and keep moving, even if we couldn't do the volleyball, football and gym, the typical stuff. Then a lot more of the socials are inside the house. So when we're allowed to meet people, then we might meet with one or two other houses and have a small get together. But a lot of stuff now is with the housemates. So we might go into the kitchen or the living room and watch a film or play some games, but all responsibly, obviously. And that's a really good way to still take away from the work, take a break, have some fun, and be socially distanced. If possible, when the lockdown restrictions are a bit eased, it is nice to go and see some other people, maybe go out to the pub, maybe go to their house. There's a lot of ways to be responsibly out and about during this sort of thing, obviously with a mask and socially distanced and respecting the rules. So it is a bit of a change. It definitely feels different, not being quite as busy with all of the extracurricular stuff, but it's not too awful. I think hoping things go back to normal as soon as possible, then it'll be really nice to start doing all of the outdoor socialising again.